The Bloody Elbow staff has made its picks for Saturday's UFC Fight Night, Werdum vs. Volkov card, and only Nick Baldwin is picking Alexander Volkov to beat Fabricio Werdum in the main event. Meanwhile, it's a unanimous nod for Jimmy Manuwa to once again beat Jan Blachowicz. Note: predictions are entered throughout the week and collected the day before the event. Explanations behind each pick are not required, and some writers opt not to do so for their own reasons. For example, if Phil McKenzie entered all of his predictions on Wednesday without adding in any explanations, he has no idea if he's going to be the only one siding with one fighter for any given fight. Fabricio Werdum vs. Alexander Volkov. Mookie Alexander. The threats to Werdum are usually guys with one-punch power. Volkov is not that guy. I don't know if he's really capable of overwhelming Werdum with volume, either. Add that to his shaky takedown defense and I think Werdum should have this one, but it is heavyweight, so you can expect craziness from time to time. Fabricio Werdum by submission, round 2. Fraser Coffin. I really would love to come up with some reason to pick Volkov here. That's largely because of Werdum's Kadyrov connection, but it's also because the division is just undeniably more interesting with a Volkov win. Werdum winning keeps us largely on the treadmill, but I'm afraid that's where we're going. Volkov is not a crazy power puncher, and Werdum knows how to outpoint guys over time, and then capitalize when he gets them down. Add in Volkov's relative lack of skill on the ground, and this feels like a no-brainer. Sadly, Fabricio Werdum, sub, R3 staff picking Werdum, Harry, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dana staff picking Volkov, Nick Jan Blachowicz vs. Jimmy Manuwa. Mookie Alexander. Seriously, why is this happening again? It wasn't good to watch the first time, and there's a real chance it won't be any better the second time. Jimmy Manuwa by unanimous decision. Phil McKenzie. While Manuwa remains a dynamite hitter with a unique pressure style which lives around driving people into the arc of his left hook, it's becoming unfortunately apparent that his chin just is not great, or even good. Blachowicz has quietly been improving since the last fight. He can wrestle more effectively. He can fight for 3 whole rounds. That being said, he also backs himself into the fence a lot, and Manuwa remains the bigger single-shot hitter and a far more effective clinch striker. Improvements aside, Blachowicz is still only 2 removed from utterly gassing himself out against Cummins. Jimmy Manuwa by unanimous decision. Staff picking Blachowicz. Staff picking Manuwa, Nick, Harry, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dane. Tom Duquesnoy vs. Teran Ware. Mookie Alexander. What rough matchmaking for Ware. Stammen, O'Malley, now Duquesnoy. He was admittedly competitive in his 2 previous but clearly lost them both, and I don't see him able to cope with the dynamic game that Duquesnoy presents. Tom Duquesnoy by TKO, round 3. Phil McKenzie. No bones about it, Duquesnoy's performance against the Detroit Muscle Blossom was concerning. Not because he lost, but because he looked like he accepted it. In the last round, with everything to play for, he just kind of closed up shop. Young, hungry fighters just shouldn't be doing that. They should be starving for every win. Ware is a cunning, clever box, but he has clearly been picked as a bounce-back. Duquesnoy should be able to kick from the outside, and more pertinently he should be able to capitalize on Ware's mediocre takedown defense and tendency to hang out in the clinch. Tom Duquesnoy by TKO, round 2. Staff picking Duquesnoy, Nick, Harry, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dana staff picking Ware, Leon Edwards vs. Peter Sobot. Mookie Alexander. The biggest fight in Jamaican MMA is upon us. Leon Edwards is an underrated talent, while Sobot has largely improved his skills since he was first cut by the UFC. I think Edwards' speed advantage will be huge here, and if he can get the range he wants, he can outstrike a Sobota. He has to be very careful with Sobota's power, which wrecked Ben Saunders last year, but I like Edwards to get the job done. Leon Edwards by unanimous decision. Staff picking Edwards, Nick, Harry, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dana staff picking Sobota, John Phillips vs. Charles Bird. Phil McKenzie. Kid Dynamite vs. the White Mike Tyson. For real, this is a name-based booking worthy of Prime Joe Silva. Phillips, the Caucasian representation, is the one who more like the namesake, albeit with almost none of the defense or craft. His closest analog is more likely John Lineker in all honesty. Move forward, punch, 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 punch. Bird is a more traditional pot-shotting striker with a powerful jab and a sneaky head kick, and he can also grapple. He is obviously the better fighter, but I just feel like he's going to let himself get put into the fence here, and Phillips is a monstrous hitter. The longer it goes, the more likely Bird's three-dimensional game is to assert itself, but John Phillips by TKO. Round 1. Staff picking Phillips, Harry, Bissell, Mookie, Steffi, Phil, Tim, Dana. Staff picking Bird, Nick, Fraser. Danny Roberts vs. Oliver Enkamp. Phil McKenzie. Like Manua, Roberts' chin seems to be a primary weak point. A slick, rangy southpaw kickboxer, his problems have come when people have forced him backwards and trapped him into combinations or pinned him to the cage. Enkamp is not a pressure fighter at all, more of the Stasiak, Bochniak and I guess Nelson, GSP brand of karate-style counterfighter. One of the underrated factors which makes that style work for Gunny, GSP is that they force the issue and move forwards, and Enkamp has much more of a tendency to trap himself. Roberts' takedown defense has held up well in the UFC, so it seems that Enkamp's paths to victory are more in a single big blitz combination, or in attacking Roberts from the clinch, where Enkamp is surprisingly gritty and active. Still, Danny Roberts by unanimous decision. Staff picking Roberts, Nick, Harry, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dana. Staff picking Enkamp, Danny Henry vs. Hakeem Dawodu. Mookie Alexander. I am really excited about Dawodu's debut. He's a fun fighter to watch and Henry can often be reckless. This is a sneaky contender for fight of the night. Hakeem Dawodu by TKO. Round 2. Phil McKenzie. Danny Henry beat Daniel Teymur in one of the finest boxcar home rings you'll ever see, walking headlong into every strike until Teymur's knuckles were bruised and his lungs were struggling. Can he do that to Dawodu? It seems unlikely. Dawodu works off a dipping jab, backed up with a nasty body-shotting left hook. His defense works well in a vacuum but often starts to disappear once he throws, which may not necessarily bode well against Henry. However, his cardio is excellent and despite getting himself into a couple of scares, I think he can broadly replicate his fun and increasingly one-sided win over Steven Seiler. Hakeem Dawodu by unanimous decision. Staff picking Henry, Harry. Staff picking Dawodu, Nick, Bissell, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dane. Paul Craig vs. Magomed. Phil McKenzie. Much as I'd like to see the Batu pick up a win here, this seems like an awful matchup for him. He's never really developed either the striking or the offensive wrestling to back up his submission game, and fighting off your back is a terrible proposition at LHW, let alone against someone like Ankalaev. The Chechenian is as battle-hardened as pre-UFC LHWs tend to get, and a monstrous ground-and-pound fighter. As always, rooting for the Kadyrov guy to get wiped out, but Magomed by TKO. Round 2. Staff picking Craig, Harry, Bissell, Mookie. Staff picking Ankalaev, Nick, Fraser, Steffi, Tim, Dane. Cajun Johnson vs. Stephen Ray. Mookie Alexander. Ray has been an alarmingly slow starter in recent, but he's the more well-rounded fighter, and I see his striking being the difference in this one. Stevie Ray by split decision. Phil McKenzie. I guess the real question here is, how on earth did Cajun Johnson knock out Adriano Martins? Is it simply because of Martins' glacial pace and predilection for one-shot countering? Ray has also shown something of a tendency to get on his bike in recent years, so it's conceivable that he traps himself in the same way. However, while his defensive wrestling has never really gotten to the level it needs to, Ray is an underrated offensive wrestler when he wants to be, and is just more fundamentally durable than Johnson, despite their most recent performances. Clinches, shots and stand-up exchanges should eventually set up a big shot from the Scot. Stevie Ray by TKO. Round 2. Staff picking Johnson, Bissell, Steffi. Staff picking Ray, Nick, Harry, Fraser, Mookie, Phil, Tim, Dane. Mark Godbeer vs. Dmitry Sosnovsky. Mookie Alexander. This could be terrible, then again this could be terrible applies to a lot of heavyweight. Godbeer has the superior name, so he wins. Mark Godbeer by blue-collar decision. Phil McKenzie. Godbeer is a tough man style of heavyweight, decently crafty, but focused clearly on just landing his right hand over and over, and without much in the way of ancillary skills to back it up. Sosnovsky is, at the moment, a can crusher, and it's always terribly difficult to tell you how they'll do in the UFC, particularly at heavyweight. But Godbeer's weakness has always been getting put on the fence, taken down and beaten up. Congo is not exactly the world's most devastating finisher there, and he put Godbeer away. Will be profoundly unsurprised if Sosnovsky gets put into one of those "I'm not the strongest guy around" revelatory moments, but give me Dmitry Sosnovsky by TKO. Round 2. Staff picking Godbeer, Harry, Bissell, Fraser, Mookie, Tim. Staff picking Sosnovsky, Nick, Steffi, Phil, Dane. Narimani vs. Nasrat Hakparas, Phil McKenzie. This should be a lot of fun. Narimani is something of a flat-footed counterfighter, who makes it difficult to intrude on his space with an active jab and short combinations. Hakparas impressed me tremendously in a nightmarish-style matchup against Held, surviving well on the ground and hurting the Polish fighter on the feet. At only 22 years old, he shows a surprising amount of depth, tons of power and speed, and has been spending time at both TriStar and King's MMA, which just sounds like a near-perfect combination of gyms for a developing fighter. Narimani is very tough, but I think the short notice and the weight class jump bode poorly here, as he relies a good deal on his size, power and consistency to insulate him from consistent issues like his defense moving backwards. Nasrat Hakparas by TKO. Round 2. Staff picking Narimani, Harry. Staff picking Hakparas, Nick, Bissell, Phil, Fraser, Mookie, Steffi, Tim, Dane. 48%, 77 votes, 10%, 17 votes, 11%, 19 votes, 2%, 4 votes, 0%, 1 vote, 25%, 41 votes, 159 votes. Total vote now.